I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Your mind is performing miracles right now, filtering thoughts, storing memories, keeping your sense of self intact, all while you simply exist. You'll discover what happens when exhaustion strips these abilities away, and understand why rest isn't optional for consciousness itself. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Now settle in. You're in your safe space while your brain quietly works behind the scenes, maintaining your grip on reality, your sense of who you are. Allow yourself this moment of peace. We'll journey through 100 psychology facts about exhaustion's effects on the mind, from the first subtle changes after one sleepless night, to perception breaking down, to how consciousness itself depends on rest. This thoughtful journey through consciousness builds bridges between searching minds. A gentle subscribe, like or sharing your thoughts creates a pathway for more sleepless souls to discover and brings us closer to protect this sanctuary. One peaceful night at a time. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. Your presence here inspires us. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench, your breath deepen naturally. You can let these thoughts drift past without holding them. Sense that soothing heaviness enveloping you, like your consciousness slowly dimming its brightness. Thoughts dissolving into the peaceful fog of approaching sleep. Safe and undisturbed. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're floating where memories rest safely in gentle darkness. Let your mind merge with infinite peace. And now we begin. Your brain never truly rests. Even during sleep, while you dream and drift through the night, your mind is actually extraordinarily busy. Sleep researchers at the University of Rochester discovered in 2023 that during sleep, your brain doesn't simply turn off. It shifts into a different kind of work. The glymphatic system activates, flushing out toxic proteins that accumulate during waking hours. Neurons fire in specific patterns that consolidate memories, moving experiences from temporary storage into long-term vaults. Your emotional centers recalibrate, processing the day's feelings and resetting for tomorrow. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and self-control, essentially performs maintenance on itself. Without this nightly restoration, these processes begin failing within hours. Sleep isn't downtime. It's when your mind does some of its most essential work, the kind that keeps you fundamentally you. Scientists once believed sleep was simply the brain powering down, like turning off a machine. This view persisted for decades, treating rest as passive inactivity. But modern neuroscience reveals something far more fascinating. Sleep is active restoration, a carefully orchestrated sequence of brain states, each serving specific purposes. During deep sleep, your brain waves slow into delta patterns, allowing certain neural networks to strengthen while others prune away unnecessary connections. REM sleep brings vivid dreams and rapid eye movements, while your muscles remain paralyzed. A safety mechanism as your brain processes emotions and integrates new learning. Recent research in Nature Neuroscience shows that specific sleep stages repair different cognitive functions. Your sense of reality, your emotional stability, your very identity, all depend on this nightly cycle. Sleep is not rest from consciousness, but maintenance of it. When you sleep normally, your brain performs what neuroscientists call memory consolidation throughout your day. you encounter thousands of experiences, facts, conversations, and sensations. Your hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain, temporarily holds these memories like a notebook. During sleep, particularly during slow wave and REM stages, your brain reviews this notebook, deciding what to keep, what to discard, and how to file important memories in long-term storage within your cortex. Studies using functional MRI scans show that the same neural patterns that fired when you learned something new replay during sleep, but faster and more efficiently. This replay strengthens synaptic connections, essentially writing memories more permanently into your brain's architecture. Without adequate sleep, this consolidation process fails. Memories remain fragile, easily forgotten, never properly stored. Your emotional life also depends on sleep in ways researchers are just beginning to understand fully. The amygdala, your brain's emotional center, processes feelings and reactions throughout your day. Joy, fear, anger, sadness, excitement. During waking hours, the prefrontal cortex, located behind your forehead, acts like a wise supervisor, keeping emotional reactions measured and appropriate. But this control requires enormous energy. Sleep allows the prefrontal cortex to restore its resources while the amygdala processes emotional memories, stripping away some of their intense charge. Research from UC Berkeley's Sleep Lab has shown that REM sleep helps separate the emotional intensity from emotional memories, allowing you to remember events without reliving their full impact. This is why difficult experiences often feel slightly more manageable after a good night's sleep. Your brain has worked through them while you rested. Sleep also maintains something neuroscientists call cognitive flexibility, your ability to switch between different thoughts, adapt to new information, and see problems from multiple angles. During deep sleep stages, your brain reorganizes neural pathways, making new connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. This is why solutions to complex problems sometimes appear after sleeping on them. The phrase, "I'll sleep on it," has deep neurological truth. Research from MIT in 2024 demonstrated that specific sleep stages allow the brain to test different neural configurations, essentially trying out new ways of connecting information. When you wake, your mind has literally rewired itself slightly, making new patterns of thought possible. Without sleep, your thinking becomes rigid, stuck in familiar patterns, unable to innovate or adapt as circumstances demand. Now, let's explore what happens when you miss just one night of sleep. The first changes begin within hours of staying awake past your normal bedtime. Adenosine, a neurochemical byproduct of brain activity, accumulates in your system throughout the day. Normally, sleep clears this adenosine away, but when you stay awake, adenosine continues building up, creating that familiar feeling of sleepiness. Your brain's way of demanding rest. As levels rise, your attention begins to waver. Tasks that usually feel effortless require more concentration. You might read the same sentence twice without comprehending it. These aren't dramatic changes yet. Most people barely notice them at first. You feel tired. Yes, but you tell yourself you're functioning normally. Your brain knows differently. It's already beginning to struggle. After staying awake for 16 to 18 hours, approximately one full waking day, your cognitive performance begins declining measurably. Reaction times slow by about 10 to 15%. This might not sound significant, but consider what it means if you're driving. Those extra milliseconds could be the difference between stopping safely and a collision. Your working memory, the mental scratchpad you use to hold information temporarily, starts failing. You might walk into a room and forget why. You dial a phone number and forget who you're calling mid-dial. These lapses frustrate you, but they're just your brain signaling its need for restoration. Without sleep, the temporary storage systems in your mind can't clear space for new information. Everything begins backing up. Your mood also shifts after just one night of poor sleep. Studies from Johns Hopkins University in 2024 found that even partial sleep deprivation, getting 4 or 5 hours instead of 7 or 8, reduces positive emotions significantly while amplifying negative ones. Small annoyances feel bigger. Minor disappointments sting more deeply. Things that would normally make you smile barely register. This isn't weakness or bad temperament. It's neurochemistry. Your brain's emotional regulation systems require sleep to maintain balance. Without it, your amygdala processes emotional information more intensely, while the prefrontal regions that normally provide perspective lack the resources to do so effectively. You're not choosing to feel worse. Your exhausted brain is simply losing its ability to maintain emotional equilibrium. Perhaps most concerning, you likely don't realize how impaired you've become. Research consistently shows that sleep-deprived individuals underestimate their cognitive decline. You feel tired. Yes, but you believe you're still performing adequately. Meanwhile, objective tests reveal significant impairment in attention, decision-making, and reaction time. This gap between perceived and actual performance creates danger. Surgeons, pilots, drivers, and anyone making important decisions while exhausted often feel capable when they're not. Your brain's self-monitoring systems, the parts that usually notice when you're not thinking clearly, are themselves impaired by lack of sleep. It's a cruel paradox that tiredness that clouds your judgment also prevents you from recognizing that your judgment is clouded. So yes, your mind notices immediately when sleep is missing. Even after one night of inadequate rest, subtle but significant changes ripple through your cognitive and emotional systems. Attention wavers, memory encoding weakens, emotional control slips, and crucially, your awareness of these changes diminishes, leaving you believing you're fine when you're already struggling. These early effects might seem minor, easy to push through with caffeine and willpower, but they're warning signs. Your brain's way of saying it needs restoration. What happens if you ignore these warnings? If you push through a second night, a third, the changes stop being subtle. They become impossible to ignore, as your grip on reality itself begins to loosen. After 24 hours without sleep, you've entered territory that feels both familiar and strange. You've certainly been this tired before. After traveling across time zones, pulling an all-nighter for work or school, staying up with a sick child, the fatigue is deep now, settling over your thoughts like a soft, heavy blanket. But research from the Sleep Research Society, published in early 2025, reveals what's happening beneath this tiredness. Your brain's default mode network, the system that activates when your mind wanders. When you daydream, when you simply exist without focused tasks, begins functioning abnormally. This network normally helps you maintain your sense of self, your continuity of identity. After 24 sleepless hours, it starts flickering. Like a light bulb with loose wiring, you're still you. But something feels off, slightly disconnected. Your attention at this point resembles a spotlight that keeps drifting off target. Normally, your brain can maintain focus on chosen tasks while filtering out distractions. Conversations happening nearby, birds outside the window, thoughts about dinner. This selective attention requires coordination between multiple brain regions, working together seamlessly. But after a full day and night without sleep, this coordination breaks down. Studies using EEG brain monitoring show that different regions begin operating slightly out of sync. Like musicians in an orchestra losing their rhythm, your attention wanders despite your efforts to concentrate. You start reading a paragraph and realize you absorbed none of it. Someone speaks to you, and their words seem to arrive from far away, taking extra seconds to register meaning. Memory formation at 24 hours of wakefulness becomes severely compromised. The hippocampus, essential for creating new memories, requires sleep to function optimally. Research from Stanford University's sleep lab has demonstrated that after one night without sleep, the hippocampus's ability to encode new information drops by approximately 40%. This means that nearly half of what you experience during your exhausted day won't form lasting memories. You might have entire conversations you won't remember having. You might attend meetings and retain almost nothing. This isn't happening because you're not paying attention, though that's impaired too, but because your brain literally can't convert experiences into stored memories without rest. The recording mechanism itself is failing. Decision-making becomes notably worse after a full day awake. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center that weighs options, considers consequences, and makes reasoned choices, relies heavily on adequate sleep. Without it, this region shows decreased activity on brain scans. You become impulsive, choosing immediate gratification over long-term benefits. You take risks you normally wouldn't. Studies of medical residents working extended shifts show they make significantly more errors in judgment after 24 sleepless hours. Choosing incorrect treatments, missing important symptoms, making decisions they would never make when rested. This happens to everyone, regardless of intelligence or training. The neural circuitry for sound judgment simply requires sleep to function properly. Without it, your inner wise counsel falls silent. Your perception also begins shifting in subtle ways. Colors might seem slightly less vibrant. Sounds may feel muffled or oddly amplified. Your sense of time distorts. Minutes can feel like hours, or hours can vanish in what seemed like minutes. These perceptual changes happen because sensory processing requires constant calibration. And sleep is when your brain recalibrates its sensory systems. Research from sleep neuroscience laboratories, including work at the Max Planck Institute, has found that visual processing areas show altered activity patterns after sleep deprivation. Processing information less accurately, you're still seeing, hearing, and feeling the world around you. But your brain is interpreting these sensations less reliably. Reality remains consistent. Your perception of reality has started to drift. Emotional responses intensify measurably after a full day awake. Studies show reactions to negative experiences increase by about 60% compared to when rested. Small frustrations trigger disproportionate responses. Minor sadness deepens. Anxiety that you normally manage easily can spike unexpectedly. Meanwhile, positive experiences register with less impact. Jokes seem less funny. Good news brings less joy. Your emotional range distorts like an image in a funhouse mirror. The difficult stretched larger, while the pleasant shrinks. This shift happens not through choice, but through neurochemical exhaustion, affecting how your brain processes emotional information. The balance that normally keeps feelings proportionate to their causes has begun tipping unfavorably. Social interactions become more difficult as exhaustion accumulates. Reading facial expressions, interpreting tone of voice, understanding subtle social cues. These skills require significant cognitive resources. After a day without sleep, your ability to read others' emotional states declines measurably. You might miss when someone is upset, fail to catch sarcasm, or misinterpret friendly teasing as criticism. Research from UCLA has found that sleep-deprived individuals show reduced activity in brain regions involved in social cognition. Conversations require more effort. You struggle to find words. You might say things you don't mean, or mean things you wouldn't normally say. The social intelligence that usually operates automatically begins requiring conscious effort you're too tired to sustain. Physical sensations also change with sleep deprivation. Pain sensitivity increases. The same stimulus that would barely bother you when rested can feel quite painful when exhausted. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley discovered that sleep deprivation heightens pain perception by reducing activity in brain regions that normally dampen pain signals. Headaches become more common. Muscles ache more. Even gentle touch can feel uncomfortable. Meanwhile, your body's healing process is slow. Small cuts take longer to heal. Your immune system weakens, making you more susceptible to illness. The body and mind are connected more intimately than we often realize. When the mind suffers from lack of sleep, the body suffers too. Appetite regulation also goes awry after 24 sleepless hours. Hormones that control hunger and fullness, leptin and ghrelin, become imbalanced. Ghrelin, which signals hunger, increases. Leptin, which signals satiety, decreases. The result is intense cravings, particularly for high-calorie, high-carbohydrate foods. Your exhausted brain seeks quick energy, making cookies and chips far more appealing than salad. Studies show sleep-deprived individuals consume approximately 300 extra calories daily without feeling more satisfied. But it's not about willpower or discipline. Your brain's hunger regulation systems require sleep to maintain proper function. Without rest, they send false signals, making you feel hungry when you're really just exhausted. Your speech patterns change subtly, but noticeably after a full day awake. You pause more often, searching for words that usually come effortlessly. You might repeat yourself without realizing it. Your sentences become simpler, less complex. Language production requires coordination between multiple brain regions. Areas that plan what you'll say. Areas that retrieve words from memory. Areas that coordinate the physical act of speaking. Sleep deprivation disrupts this coordination. Research shows that verbal fluency, the ability to produce words quickly and accurately, declines significantly after 24 hours without sleep. Conversations require more effort. You find yourself saying and more frequently. Your brain struggling to maintain the smooth flow of language. At this point, approximately 24 hours into sleep deprivation, a specific pattern has emerged in your brain chemistry. Adenosine, mentioned earlier, has accumulated to extremely high levels. This molecule now saturates receptors throughout your brain, particularly in regions controlling wakefulness. Caffeine can temporarily block these receptors, which is why coffee helps. But the adenosine remains, waiting. Your cortisol levels, the stress hormone, have also elevated abnormally. Normally, cortisol follows a daily rhythm, peaking in morning and declining by evening. Without sleep, this rhythm distorts. Your body treats prolonged wakefulness as a stressor, keeping cortisol artificially elevated. Meanwhile, your levels of neurotransmitters that support focus and motivation, dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, begin depleting. These chemicals aren't unlimited. They're produced and recycled. But production requires certain conditions, including adequate rest. As they decline, you feel increasingly apathetic. Tasks that would normally interest you seem pointless. Goals that motivated you yesterday feel irrelevant. This isn't true depression, though the neurochemistry resembles it. It's your brain's motivational systems running on empty. You're not losing interest in life. You're losing the neurochemical fuel that generates interest, enthusiasm, and drive. Your brain's ability to clear metabolic waste also continues declining. The glymphatic system operates primarily during sleep, without rest. Toxic proteins like beta amyloid and tau accumulate in brain tissue. These are the same proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease when they build up chronically over years. After just one night without sleep, concentrations of these proteins increase measurably. Your brain literally becomes slightly more toxic. Most of this damage reverses with recovery sleep. But it's a stark reminder: your brain cannot maintain itself without regular rest periods. The blood-brain barrier, normally a tight seal protecting your brain from harmful substances in your bloodstream, also becomes more permeable with sleep deprivation. Recent studies show that after 24 hours without sleep, this barrier weakens, allowing substances that should stay in the bloodstream to enter brain tissue. This contributes to the inflammation and impaired function you're experiencing. Your brain is literally becoming less protected, more vulnerable. The fortress walls that normally guard your mind have developed cracks. So, by the end of the first sleepless day and night, a clear pattern has emerged. Your brain is struggling across multiple systems simultaneously. Memory formation failing, emotional control slipping, attention wavering, perception shifting. And beneath all these symptoms, neurochemical imbalances and toxic accumulations building. You're still conscious, still functioning in a basic sense, but the mind that makes you specifically you, your judgment, your emotional balance, your ability to interact normally, has already begun changing. And if you continue without sleep, these changes intensify dramatically. Let's pause here and notice your body. As you breathe out slowly, appreciate each tiny cell inside. Trillions of organisms working in silence. Heart beating, lungs breathing, brain thinking, all without your command. Notice the gentle sensations on your skin, in your muscles, along your spine. You are a complete ecosystem, diverse, self-balancing. Your body knows how to rest. It's asking for that rest right now. You can trust it. You can surrender to it. Now we continue. At 48 hours without sleep, you've crossed into territory most people rarely experience. 2 full days and nights of continuous wakefulness. If the first 24 hours showed your brain struggling, the second 24 hours reveal it beginning to break down in more obvious ways. The changes are no longer subtle. Research from the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, studying soldiers during extended operations, shows that cognitive performance at this point drops to levels comparable to legal intoxication. If you took a breathalyzer test for cognition, you'd fail. Yet there's no caffeine amount that can restore function now. Your brain has moved beyond simple tiredness into a state of profound change, one that continues deepening until rest finally comes. One of the most striking changes at 48 hours is the appearance of microsleeps, brief moments when your brain essentially forces itself offline despite your attempts to stay awake. These last just a few seconds, sometimes only 1 or 2. Your eyes might remain open. You might even continue simple activities, but consciousness flickers off. Studies using EEG monitoring show that during microsleeps, your brainwaves shift into sleep patterns even while you're technically awake. You might be sitting upright, eyes forward, but your brain has momentarily checked out. These microsleeps happen involuntarily, randomly, without warning. You cannot control them through willpower. Your brain is taking the rest you're denying it, fragmenting itself into moments of forced shutdown. Visual perception becomes notably unreliable at this stage. Many people report seeing movement in their peripheral vision, shadows that aren't there, shapes shifting at the edges of their sight. Walls might seem to breathe slightly. Patterns might appear to move. These aren't quite hallucinations yet, but they're precursors. Your visual cortex, responsible for processing what you see, begins generating its own signals in the absence of proper rest. Research from Harvard Medical School has demonstrated that sleep-deprived brains show spontaneous activity in visual regions, creating perceptual experiences without corresponding external stimuli. Your mind is starting to fill in gaps with information it generates internally, blurring the line between what's real and what your exhausted brain creates. Auditory perception also distorts. Sounds might seem louder or softer than they are. You might hear murmuring when there's only silence, or think someone called your name when no one did. These auditory illusions happen because your brain constantly predicts what it expects to hear, then compares those predictions to actual sensory input. With sleep deprivation, this prediction system becomes overactive, sometimes generating false signals. Research shows that the superior temporal gyrus, which processes sound, shows abnormal activity patterns after extended wakefulness. Your hearing itself is fine, but your brain's interpretation of sounds has become unreliable, sometimes inventing audio experiences that don't correspond to reality. Your sense of time becomes severely distorted at 48 hours. Minutes can feel like hours. Hours can vanish in what seems like seconds. This happens because time perception relies on proper functioning of multiple brain regions working together, including the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, areas we know are significantly impaired by sleep deprivation. Studies show that sleep-deprived individuals consistently misjudge time intervals, sometimes by factors of 2 or 3. You might look at a clock and be shocked that an hour passed when it felt like 10 minutes, or vice versa. Time itself hasn't changed, of course, but your internal clock, your subjective experience of duration, has lost its calibration. Memory at this point approaches complete failure for new information. That 40% reduction in hippocampal encoding at 24 hours, at 48 hours, it's closer to 70 or 80%. You might have entire experiences that simply never form memories. Conversations vanish from recollection minutes after they end. You might walk into a room and not just forget why, but completely fail to remember walking there at all. This amnesia for ongoing experience is disorienting when it happens. Like trying to hold on to water as it slips through your fingers. You're conscious, present, interacting with the world, yet leaving almost no record. Decision-making at 48 hours becomes truly impaired. That prefrontal cortex dysfunction intensifies dramatically. You make choices that would alarm you if you were rested, spending money recklessly, saying things you'll regret, taking physical risks, ignoring consequences. Studies of shift workers, medical residents, and military personnel show that serious mistakes spike dramatically after 2 days without sleep. This isn't lack of knowledge or training. It's fundamental decision-making circuitry failing. The part of your brain that normally whispers, "Wait, think this through," has gone almost silent, leaving impulsive, short-sighted thinking in control. Emotional regulation at this point essentially collapses. That heightened reactivity to negative stimuli at 24 hours intensifies further. Research shows increases of over 100%, meaning you react more than twice as strongly to negative experiences. Meanwhile, prefrontal control has diminished to nearly nothing. The result is emotional instability, feelings arising and shifting without the usual sense of control. Tears come suddenly over nothing. Anger spikes at minor frustrations. Thoughts take on paranoid qualities. People seem threatening. Situations feel dangerous when they're not. Your brain's emotional control systems have simply lost the resources to function. Social cognition deteriorates further. Reading faces becomes difficult. Understanding sarcasm or humor fails. You might interpret neutral expressions as hostile, or miss obvious cues that someone is upset. Research shows that at this level of sleep deprivation, people perform on tests of social cognition at levels comparable to individuals with certain neurological conditions affecting social processing. But unlike those conditions, this is temporary, reversible, still, in the moment. Your ability to navigate social situations has been severely compromised. Relationships suffer. Conflicts arise from misunderstandings that wouldn't happen if you were rested. Your immune system has also significantly weakened by 48 hours. Research from Carnegie Mellon University showed that people deprived of sleep for 2 nights showed dramatic reductions in natural killer cells, immune cells that fight infections and cancer. Your body's ability to recognize and respond to threats has diminished. If you're exposed to a cold virus at this point, you're several times more likely to get sick than if you were well rested. Sleep isn't just mental rest. It's when your immune system performs essential maintenance and preparation. What's happening physiologically is that your body has shifted into emergency mode. Cortisol remains elevated continuously now. Inflammatory markers in your bloodstream increase. Blood pressure rises. Heart rate becomes less variable. A sign that your autonomic nervous system, which normally balances rest and activation, has lost its flexibility. Your body is treating prolonged wakefulness as a serious threat, mobilizing stress responses designed for short-term crises. But these responses aren't meant to run continuously. Using them for extended periods causes damage throughout your system. Your motor control also degrades noticeably. Fine motor skills, the ability to precisely coordinate small movements, decline significantly. Your handwriting becomes messier. Typing accuracy drops. You might bump into doorways, misjudge distances, drop things. This happens because motor control requires constant communication between your brain and muscles, with your cerebellum and motor cortex coordinating movements. Sleep deprivation disrupts this coordination. Studies show reaction times and motor precision at 48 hours match or exceed impairment from moderate alcohol intoxication. Paranoid thinking and suspiciousness increase markedly at this stage. Research from multiple sleep laboratories shows that extended wakefulness activates brain patterns similar to those seen in paranoid thinking. People start seeing patterns that aren't there, interpreting innocent actions as threatening, believing others have negative intentions. This isn't psychosis yet, but it's moving in that direction. Your brain's ability to accurately assess social threats has broken down. The filter that normally distinguishes real dangers from imagined ones has failed. Physical appearance also changes visibly. Eyes become red and puffy. Skin looks pale and dull. Facial expressions flatten. Others can see that something is wrong. But more concerning than how you look is that you likely don't realize how impaired you are. Self-awareness continues declining. You might feel terrible but still believe you're functioning adequately. Meanwhile, anyone observing you can see clear signs of dysfunction. The gap between your perception and reality has widened into a chasm. By 48 hours, a new understanding has emerged. This isn't just extreme tiredness. Your brain can no longer distinguish reliably between what's real and what's imagined. Perception has become unreliable. Memory has mostly stopped working. Emotions have lost all regulation. Decision-making has collapsed. Your sense of self, normally so constant and clear, has begun fragmenting. You're still conscious, but that consciousness has become strange, unstable, disconnected. And if you push beyond this point, these changes intensify further still. You're still here with me. Thoughts still flickering like candlelight. Just notice. Don't judge. Just notice where your mind is. We're exploring consciousness itself. The very thing doing the exploring right now. Strange, beautiful, and perfectly calm. If this gentle journey helps bring you peace, a quiet like or subscribe helps another restless mind find their way here too. One peaceful night, one sleepy soul at a time. Let's drift onward together. At 72 hours without sleep, 3 full days and nights, you've entered territory that few people experience outside of extreme circumstances or medical studies. The military has researched this state. Sleep researchers have documented it under controlled conditions. What they've found is both fascinating and sobering. At this point, your cognitive performance has degraded to levels that would be considered severe impairment in any other context. If your brain were a computer, it would be running at perhaps 20% of normal capacity, with multiple critical systems crashing intermittently. Yet somehow, consciousness persists. You're still awake, still aware in some fundamental sense. But the person who's aware has become someone quite different from who you were 3 days ago. True hallucinations become common at 72 hours. These aren't the peripheral shadows or vague murmurs from 48 hours. These are full sensory experiences that seem completely real in the moment. You might see people who aren't there, You might hear entire conversations that never happened. Objects might appear, move, transform. Research studying induced sleep deprivation shows that approximately 80% of people experience hallucinations by the third sleepless day. Your brain has begun generating its own reality to fill the gaps left by failing perceptual systems. The boundary between external reality and internal imagination has effectively dissolved. You cannot trust your own senses anymore. Delusions can also emerge. False beliefs that seem absolutely true despite evidence to the contrary. You might become convinced that people are following you, that there's a conspiracy around you, that you have special powers or insights. These aren't chosen beliefs. They arise from your brain's pattern detection systems malfunctioning, finding connections and meanings that don't exist. Studies show that the same brain regions involved in delusional thinking in psychiatric conditions become hyperactive during severe sleep deprivation. Your mind is desperately trying to make sense of the confusing, contradictory information it's receiving. And in doing so, it creates false explanations that feel more real than reality itself. Your sense of self, that continuous feeling of being a single, coherent person, begins fragmenting at this stage. Neuroscientists call this depersonalization or dissociation. You might feel like you're watching yourself from outside your body. Your actions might not feel like your own. You might question whether you're real, whether others are real. This is one of the most unsettling aspects of extreme sleep deprivation. Research from Stanford University using brain imaging shows that regions responsible for self-awareness and bodily integration show severely disrupted activity patterns after 3 days without sleep. The neural basis of your identity has become unstable. Speech at this point can become noticeably incoherent. You might start sentences you can't finish. Words come out in the wrong order. You might invent words that don't exist, convinced they're real. Language production requires extensive neural coordination, and that coordination has broken down severely. Studies document that severely sleep-deprived individuals sometimes produce speech that resembles certain types of aphasia, language disorders typically caused by brain damage. But again, this is temporary, reversible. Your language centers aren't damaged. They're simply too exhausted to function properly. Motor control degrades further into visible tremors and uncoordinated movements. Your gait might become unsteady. As if you're drunk, hand-eye coordination fails at tasks that normally require no thought. Researchers have documented that at 72 hours, motor performance impairment exceeds what's typically seen at blood alcohol levels well above legal limits for driving. The cerebellum, which coordinates movement, and the motor cortex, which plans and executes movement, have both become severely dysfunctional. Your brain can barely control your body anymore. Emotional responses at this stage become extremely unpredictable and often inappropriate. You might laugh at things that aren't funny, or laugh at inappropriate times. You might cry without clear reason. Emotional blunting can occur, feeling nothing even when you know you should feel something. The connection between circumstances and appropriate emotional responses has been severed. Studies show that brain imaging at this level of sleep deprivation reveals chaotic, uncoordinated activity in emotional centers. Your feelings have become random, disconnected from both internal states and external events. Your sense of temporal continuity, the feeling that you're the same person who existed 10 minutes ago, an hour ago, yesterday, breaks down at this stage. Research shows that hippocampal activity is so disrupted that very little information gets encoded. You're living in a kind of continuous present, with minimal connection to the recent past and no formation of ongoing narrative memory. Conversations vanish moments after they end. Experiences dissolve like dreams upon waking. The thread that normally connects one moment to the next has been severed. Paranoia and anxiety often peak at this stage. The world feels threatening even when it's not. Neutral situations seem dangerous. Familiar people might seem like strangers or threats. This happens because the amygdala, your threat detection system, has become hyperactive, while the prefrontal regions that normally evaluate threats realistically have shut down. Research shows that at 72 hours, the brain's threat response resembles patterns seen in acute anxiety disorders. You're not developing an anxiety disorder, but your brain is temporarily functioning as if you have one. Halfway through this exploration, the implications have become clear. Sleep deprivation beyond 72 hours doesn't just make you tired or impair your performance. It fundamentally alters consciousness itself, perception, memory, emotion, identity, language, motor control. Everything that makes subjective experience coherent has degraded severely. You're still conscious, but barely. The question, what happens when you don't sleep, has a clear answer that reveals itself gently. You begin losing your grip on reality, losing your sense of self, losing the basic functions that make you recognizably human. Let's pause here. Halfway through our journey, take a deep breath. Notice how even reading about exhaustion might make you feel tired. That's your body's wisdom speaking. You don't need to experience these extreme states yourself. You can learn from them while staying safely rested. Feel the support beneath you. Bed, chair, floor. Feel gravity holding you gently. Time is just a river flowing past. You're safe here in the present moment. Aware, conscious, whole. Your mind knows how to maintain itself through rest. Trust that knowledge. Now we continue. Gently forward. Now let's shift perspective. Most people never stay awake for 3 or 4 days continuously. But many millions experience something potentially more damaging: chronic partial sleep deprivation. Getting 5 or 6 hours nightly instead of the 7 to 9 most adults need. This happens gradually, accumulating over weeks, months, years. Research from the University of Pennsylvania, published in 2024, showed that limiting sleep to 6 hours per night for 2 weeks produces cognitive impairment equivalent to 2 full nights without sleep. But because the decline happens gradually, people don't notice. They adapt to functioning poorly, forgetting what mental clarity feels like. This chronic state doesn't produce dramatic hallucinations or obvious breakdowns. Instead, it creates a subtle but pervasive erosion of mental function. Attention remains chronically scattered. Memory formation stays impaired. Emotional regulation never fully develops. Decision-making remains slightly compromised. Studies show that people chronically sleeping 6 hours believe they've adapted, that they're functioning fine. But objective testing reveals continued impairment across multiple cognitive domains. They haven't adapted. They've simply lost awareness of what normal functioning feels like. The person they could be, well rested, remains unknown to them. Chronic sleep deprivation affects physical health profoundly. Research accumulated over decades shows clear links to numerous conditions. Cardiovascular disease risk increases significantly. Heart attacks and strokes become more likely as blood pressure stays elevated. Inflammation persists, and arterial walls suffer ongoing damage. Type 2 diabetes risk rises as insulin sensitivity decreases and glucose metabolism becomes impaired. Obesity becomes more likely as those hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, remain chronically imbalanced. Driving, overeating, these aren't minor correlations. The connections are strong, documented across numerous large studies. Perhaps most concerning for long-term health, chronic sleep deprivation appears linked to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Remember those toxic proteins, beta amyloid and tau, that accumulate during wakefulness and get cleared during sleep when sleep is chronically inadequate. Clearance never catches up to accumulation. Over years, these proteins build up in brain tissue. Research from Washington University has shown that people who consistently sleep less than 7 hours show measurably higher levels of Alzheimer's-related proteins in their brains. Even decades before any symptoms appear, the immune system suffers continuously from chronic sleep loss. Those natural killer cells stay depleted. White blood cell function remains impaired. Inflammation persists at low levels throughout the body, what researchers call chronic low-grade inflammation, linked to nearly every age-related disease. Studies show that chronically sleep-deprived individuals get sick more often, recover more slowly, and respond less effectively to vaccines. Their bodies exist in a state of constant mild emergency, never fully returning to the balanced, healthy state that adequate sleep provides. Mental health connections with chronic sleep deprivation have become increasingly clear. Depression and sleep problems form a bidirectional relationship. Each makes the other worse. Research from multiple institutions shows that treating sleep problems can significantly improve depression symptoms. While improving depression often normalizes sleep, anxiety disorders show similar patterns. Chronic sleep loss keeps the amygdala hyperactive and the prefrontal cortex underactive, exactly the brain pattern associated with anxiety. Over time, this pattern can become self-sustaining. Personality itself can shift with chronic sleep deprivation. Long-term studies following people over years show measurable changes in personality traits. Conscientiousness decreases. People become less organized, less reliable, less disciplined. Agreeableness drops. They become more irritable, less cooperative, less empathetic. Emotional stability declines. Mood swings become more common. Resilience decreases. These aren't minor shifts. They represent fundamental changes in how people interact with the world and others. The person you become with chronic exhaustion differs from who you would be well rested. Relationships suffer from chronic sleep loss. Partners report more conflicts, less satisfaction, more thoughts of separation. Parent-child relationships show more tension and less warmth. Friendships become harder to maintain. This happens through multiple mechanisms. The sleep-deprived person is more irritable, less emotionally regulated, less able to read social cues, less patient, less empathetic. They're also less motivated to invest in relationships, social bonds, which require consistent effort and emotional energy. Fray when one or both people remain chronically exhausted. Work performance declines across multiple dimensions. Productivity drops, not just from slower work, but from more mistakes requiring correction. Creativity diminishes as the brain lacks the rest needed to form novel connections. leadership ability suffers as emotional regulation and social cognition decline. Studies of workplace productivity show that chronic sleep deprivation costs companies enormous amounts in lost efficiency, errors, and poor decisions. Yet the problem remains often invisible, with exhausted workers believing they're performing adequately. Academic performance in students shows strong correlations with sleep. Research consistently demonstrates that students sleeping 6 hours perform significantly worse than those sleeping 8. Even when controlling for study time and ability, memory consolidation for learned material happens during sleep. Problem-solving skills improve after rest. Creative insights emerge from well-rested minds. Students who sacrifice sleep to study more actually learn less than those who study less but sleep adequately. The brain requires rest to retain information. Chronic sleep loss also affects how the brain structurally develops and ages. MRI studies show that sustained sleep deprivation during adolescence and young adulthood can affect brain maturation, particularly in prefrontal regions responsible for judgment and emotional control. In older adults, chronic sleep problems accelerate brain aging, with greater loss of gray matter and white matter integrity. The physical structure of the brain itself reflects the sleep it has or hasn't received over years. Stress resilience diminishes with chronic exhaustion. The ability to cope with challenges, bounce back from setbacks, and maintain perspective under pressure requires adequate sleep. Research shows that sleep-deprived individuals perceive situations as more stressful than rested individuals do, and they generate fewer effective coping strategies. Over time, this reduced resilience can lead to burnout, chronic stress disorders, and diminished quality of life. The buffer that normally protects mental health erodes slowly. Self-regulation abilities, controlling impulses, maintaining discipline, resisting temptations, all depend heavily on sleep. Studies show that chronically sleep-deprived individuals struggle more with addiction, have more difficulty maintaining diets or exercise programs, spend money more impulsively, and generally make poorer long-term choices. That prefrontal cortex guidance system never fully recovers between days, leaving people chronically vulnerable to short-term thinking and impulsive decisions that undermine their long-term goals and well-being. The subjective experience of life itself changes with chronic exhaustion. Colors seem duller. Food tastes less interesting. Music moves you less. Conversations feel more effortful. Achievements bring less satisfaction. This isn't clinical depression, though it resembles it. It's chronic fatigue affecting the brain's reward and pleasure systems. Life continues, but the richness, the vibrancy, the joy that makes life worth living gradually fades into a gray monotony. Hope and optimism diminish with sustained sleep loss. The ability to imagine positive futures, to believe things can improve, to maintain motivation toward distant goals, all require mental resources that chronic exhaustion depletes. Research shows that sleep-deprived individuals show more pessimistic thinking, expect worse outcomes, and feel less agency over their circumstances. The future looks darker not because it is darker, but because the exhausted mind cannot generate hopeful visions. Sense of meaning and purpose can erode with chronic fatigue. The capacity to connect daily actions to larger values and goals requires reflection, perspective, and emotional depth, all impaired by sleep loss. Studies of meaning in life show correlations with sleep quality. Well-rested people report stronger sense of purpose, greater life satisfaction, more connection to values. Exhaustion leaves people going through motions without understanding why. Empathy and compassion decline noticeably with chronic sleep deprivation. The ability to imagine others' perspectives, feel their emotions, and respond with kindness requires cognitive and emotional resources. Research shows sleep-deprived individuals show less empathetic concern, less helping behavior, more self-focused thinking. They're not becoming bad people. They simply lack the mental capacity to extend beyond their own struggling state to truly connect with others' experiences. Time perspective shifts with chronic exhaustion. Well-rested people can balance present needs with future planning, immediate pleasures with long-term consequences. Sleep-deprived individuals become increasingly present-focused, unable to effectively consider future implications. This temporal myopia affects everything from health behaviors to financial decisions to relationship choices. The future becomes abstract, unreal, while only immediate concerns feel tangible. Sense of identity can become less stable with ongoing sleep problems. That coherent narrative of self, knowing who you are, what you value, what defines you, requires integration across memory, emotion, and self-reflection. Chronic exhaustion disrupts this integration. People report feeling unlike themselves, not recognizing their own behavior, wondering who they've become. The person in the mirror seems increasingly like a stranger. Learning and neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, adapt, form new connections, require adequate sleep. Chronic sleep deprivation essentially makes the brain less plastic, less able to learn and change. This affects not just academic learning, but all adaptation. Learning new skills, adjusting to life changes, recovering from trauma, developing new perspectives. The brain becomes stuck, rigid, unable to grow. By this point in our exploration, a shift in understanding has occurred. Chronic sleep deprivation isn't just about feeling tired. It represents a fundamental transformation of who you are. You're thinking, you're feeling, you're relating, you're becoming. It's not a state you're in temporarily. It's a process that shapes you continuously, eroding capacities and qualities that define human flourishing. This erosion happens invisibly, gradually, without dramatic symptoms. You don't hallucinate or collapse. You just slowly become a diminished version of yourself, often without realizing it. You adapt to functioning poorly, believing this is normal, not remembering what clarity and vitality feel like. The tragedy is that many people spend years, even decades, in this state. Modern culture often treats sleep as optional, a luxury, something to sacrifice for productivity or entertainment. This view doesn't align with what neuroscience has discovered about our biological needs. Sleep is biological necessity, as essential as food or water. You cannot cheat it. You can only go into debt, paying interest through diminished function and reduced quality of life. The good news is that most effects of sleep deprivation are reversible. The brain wants to heal. The body wants to restore balance. Given adequate rest over time, cognitive function returns. Emotional regulation stabilizes. Health markers improve. The damage isn't permanent. But recovery requires actually prioritizing sleep consistently over extended time. So chronic sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it transforms who you are fundamentally. Your cognition, emotion, behavior, relationships, health, and sense of self. It's not merely a symptom or inconvenience. It's a chronic condition affecting every dimension of human experience. Understanding this reveals why sleep isn't optional. It's foundational. You might be feeling tired now. That's perfectly fine. Breathe slowly. Feel the cycles. Your breath. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. A small cycle within the vast universe. Like day and night. Like seasons turning. Like the moon's phases. Your body follows these rhythms naturally. You don't need to force anything. Let everything unfold in its perfect order. Like planets silently rotating in their orbits. Unhurried. Unresisting. Simply existing. Your exhaustion releases. Your peace deepens. We're almost there now. Now we arrive at perhaps the most hopeful part of this journey. What happens when you finally sleep after deprivation? When you finally give your mind the rest it's been desperately needing? Something remarkable begins immediately. Within the first moments of sleep onset, your brainwaves shift into patterns that signal healing has begun. The frantic, disorganized electrical activity of exhaustion gives way to organized, rhythmic waves. Your brain recognizes rest and responds instantly, beginning restoration. During that first recovery sleep, you'll likely experience what researchers call sleep rebound, especially of REM sleep and deep slow-wave sleep. Your brain prioritizes the sleep stages it's been missing most. If you've been deprived of REM sleep, you'll have much more REM than usual. If deep sleep was lacking, you'll spend extra time there. Your brain knows what it needs and takes it without your conscious guidance. This recovery isn't random. It's precisely targeted. The glymphatic system activates powerfully during recovery sleep, clearing toxic proteins that built up during wakefulness. Studies show that after sleep deprivation, clearance of beta amyloid and tau accelerates dramatically during the first night. Your brain goes into overdrive, flushing out accumulated waste. This cleaning happens primarily during deep sleep, which is why those deep stages feel so essential. Memory consolidation resumes during recovery sleep. All those experiences that didn't encode while sleep deprived are lost permanently. But new experiences, from the day of recovery, get processed normally again. Your hippocampus reconnects with your cortex, transferring temporary memories into long-term storage. The recording system comes back online, creating continuous narrative again. Emotional regulation begins restoring during recovery sleep, particularly during REM periods. That hyperactive amygdala calms. The prefrontal cortex regains its supervisory role. Even one night of recovery sleep significantly reduces emotional volatility. Your feelings become proportionate to circumstances again. Small annoyances return to being small rather than overwhelming. Inflammation markers in your bloodstream drop measurably after recovery sleep. Cortisol levels normalize. Following healthy daily rhythms, blood pressure decreases. Heart rate variability increases. A sign your autonomic nervous system has regained flexibility. Your body shifts from emergency stress response back into normal maintenance mode. Cognitive function returns surprisingly quickly with adequate recovery sleep. Research shows that after one good night's rest following moderate sleep deprivation, attention, reaction time, and working memory largely return to normal levels. More complex functions like decision-making take longer. Several nights of good sleep, but restoration happens reliably. Perception stabilizes after recovery sleep. Hallucinations vanish. Visual and auditory illusions disappear. Colors regain their vibrancy. Sounds return to normal intensity. Time perception recalibrates. The strange, unreal quality that colored everything during exhaustion lifts like fog burning off in morning sun. Reality becomes reliably real again. You can trust your senses once more to show you what's actually there. Your sense of self reconsolidates during recovery sleep. That fragmented, dissociated feeling of watching yourself from outside, or not recognizing yourself. These dissolve. The neural networks that maintain continuous identity reintegrate. You feel like yourself again. That coherent narrative of "I am me," "I have always been me," "I will continue being me" returns naturally. So fundamental, you stop thinking about it. Social cognition returns after adequate rest. You can read faces accurately again. Sarcasm registers. Subtle cues make sense. Empathy flows naturally, rather than requiring forced effort. Conversations feel effortless rather than exhausting. The social intelligence that seemed to have vanished comes back online, allowing you to connect with others authentically again. Relationships that suffered during exhaustion begin healing. Research on sleep recovery shows that the brain has remarkable resilience, even after extreme sleep deprivation. 3, 4, 5 days without rest. Full recovery is possible. It takes time. Sometimes 1 or 2 weeks of consistently good sleep. But function returns to baseline. The damage isn't permanent. Your brain forgives the deprivation and restores itself, given the chance. This capacity for recovery reveals something profound. Sleep isn't optional or negotiable. It's a biological necessity, as fundamental as breathing or eating. You cannot outwit this need through willpower, caffeine, or any other strategy. Your brain requires sleep to maintain itself. When denied sleep, it degrades. When given sleep, it heals. This is simply how brains work. Understanding this shifts how we think about sleep. It's not downtime or wasted hours. It's active maintenance, essential processing, critical restoration. Those 7 to 9 hours that adults typically need aren't negotiable recommendations. They're biological requirements for maintaining the extraordinary complexity of human consciousness, emotion, cognition, and identity. The answer to our question becomes clear. What happens to your mind when you don't sleep? It begins breaking down across multiple dimensions. Perception, memory, emotion, judgment, identity. These aren't minor inconveniences. They're fundamental disruptions of what makes you human. Sleep deprivation isn't just uncomfortable. It's incompatible with normal human consciousness. But equally important is what happens when you do sleep. You restore, repair, rebuild everything that makes you who you are. Your brain cleans itself, consolidates experiences, recalibrates emotions, integrates identity. Sleep is when you quite literally maintain your humanity, your sanity, your sense of being a coherent self in a comprehensible reality. This is why sleep problems are never just sleep problems. They affect everything. Your thinking, your feeling, your relating, your health, your becoming. Treating sleep as a priority isn't selfish or lazy. It's fundamental self-care, as essential as eating nutritious food or getting medical care when sick. Modern neuroscience has revealed what traditional wisdom always knew. Rest is sacred. Sleep is healing. Dreams are necessary. The night is when the day gets processed, integrated, stored. Consciousness requires unconsciousness to sustain itself. Being awake requires being asleep. These aren't contradictions. They're complementary phases of a necessary cycle. Your mind is the most complex thing in the known universe. Roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, creating a network more intricate than the entire internet. Maintaining this complexity requires enormous resources. Sleep is when your brain gets those resources, repairs damage, clears waste, restores balance. When you sleep, you're not losing time. You're investing it in the only tool you have for experiencing anything: your conscious mind. Every experience you'll ever have, every relationship you'll form, every thought you'll think requires a functioning brain. Sleep maintains that function. So what happens when you don't sleep? You lose access to your full humanity, gradually or rapidly depending on severity. And what happens when you do sleep? You restore that humanity, returning to yourself, remembering who you are, becoming capable again of all that makes life worth living. The exhaustion lifts, the fog clears, colors brighten, sounds sharpen, emotions stabilize, thoughts flow smoothly, memories form reliably, decisions come easily, words arrive naturally. The world makes sense again. Other people seem comprehensible, even delightful. The future appears hopeful. You recognize yourself. You feel like yourself. You are yourself. All from sleep. It's simple, essential, irreplaceable rest. Your mind carries you through every moment of existence. It's the lens through which you experience everything. Treating it with care, giving it the rest it needs, honoring its requirements. This isn't optional or negotiable. It's the foundation of everything else. Without adequate sleep, nothing else works properly. With it, everything becomes possible. Tonight, wherever you are, whatever brought you to this moment of rest, know that your brain is ready to heal. It's been waiting for this. Every night you sleep, healing happens. Every morning you wake restored. You've completed a cycle of renewal. This is what your biology was designed to do. The question we began with, what happens to your mind when you don't sleep, has an answer now. You lose yourself, gradually or quickly, but inevitably. You lose clarity, stability, coherence. But the deeper answer, the hopeful answer, is that you can return. Rest welcomes you back. Sleep restores you. Your mind forgives sleep deprivation. Your brain wants to heal. Your consciousness seeks wholeness. Given the chance, given regular, adequate, quality sleep, you return to yourself again and again. This is the gift of rest, the blessing of sleep, the mercy of the nightly cycle. You are always welcome home. And tonight, you're giving your body what it's been asking for. Right now, this moment, you're honoring your brain's needs. Feel how natural this is. How right. You don't have to do anything. Just let go. Let the darkness welcome you. Let restoration begin. You're safe now. You can sleep. And so, our quiet journey through the psychology of exhaustion comes to a gentle close. We've traveled from the first subtle changes after one sleepless night to perception breaking down, to identity fragmenting, to the slow erosion of chronic exhaustion, discovering along the way that consciousness itself depends utterly on rest. From failing attention to hallucinations to personality changes, we've glimpsed how fragile and yet how resilient the human mind truly is. Sleep isn't luxury. It's the foundation of everything that makes us human. The exhausted mind reminds us that we are not machines that can run continuously. We are biological beings with needs, limits, rhythms. Much of mental healing happens in silence, during sleep, in darkness. Rest reveals our vulnerability and our strength. Without sleep, we lose ourselves. With it, we return home. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about consciousness itself. Yours, mine, everyone listening. All awareness everywhere. Perhaps all connected in ways we don't yet understand. You are not alone in the universe of minds. Every person who has ever struggled with exhaustion, who has fought for rest, who has welcomed sleep, you are connected to them all. Let your entire being dissolve into the ocean of consciousness, into dreamless rest, into the space before thought. No boundaries left, only peace. If rest found you through these whispered thoughts, perhaps a quiet like helps another tired mind find their way here. One peaceful night at a time. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most journeys take you. You can allow these thoughts of consciousness and exhaustion to fade now, like morning mist dissolving in warm light, leaving only peaceful calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if gravity itself is wrapping around you like a soft blanket. If sleep comes, let it carry you like a gentle current, smoothly, inevitably, into a realm where thoughts dissolve and rest begins. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the world will still be there. Consciousness will return. Thoughts will come again. But tonight belongs to stillness. Tonight is for healing. Tonight is for rest. Rest well. Peaceful mind. And remember, your brain knows how to restore itself. You only need to allow it. Dream deeper with bedtime science. Good night.